When the rain don't fall, that's when you know you're gonna go dry. When the rain don't fall, that's when you know you're gonna go dry. And it won't do no good to be crying out loud, babe, or cursing the sky.
Hi, welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Rana, and I'm here today with Nick Gauthier, who is a Waterford RTM member, a Democrat representing the 1st District, I believe. And there's a big referendum coming up in a week in Waterford, and we're trying to get the word out because, you know, if people have the opportunity to vote on something important, we hope that they come out and do so. So welcome, Nick.
Thank you.
And like being a New Londoner, I was a Waterford resident for about 15 years, like 40 years ago, but I have not really kept up with the details. So how did this particular issue come up? It's sort of been off and on the table a few times over the past 6 months. So I don't know, explain the twists and turns that you've been through.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me here, and thank you for giving me an opportunity and the voters of our town an opportunity to exercise their democratic right to vote, to make decisions in the best interest of our town. So that's actually kind of where it started. I thought that if we were as a town going to sign on to a 15-year-long contract with Eversource, that we as the voters should be able to decide whether or not we want to sign on for that long. So basically what this is, as I said, it's a 15-year-long contract where Eversource would come in, they would install a natural gas line along Boston Post Road, and then they would heat some of our town buildings, the public safety building and the police station, for the next 15 years with natural gas. Now, there's a couple of issues that I see with it, but they both kind of relate back to the 15-year-long nature of the contract.
Well, being an observer, sort of from not very far away, I was really surprised that this became an issue because
Sure.
I've been watching and comparing the new school building, construction in Waterford and in New London, where I live. And Waterford has seemed so much more forward-thinking than New London in terms of preparing for our energy future.
Definitely.
Quaker Hill School was built about the same time Jennings was in New London, and I think Quaker Hill actually cost less and is a lead. I don't remember, silver schools, I don't remember. But with geothermal heating and staged lighting and just so much more attention to the energy future that we'll all be facing than the New London schools. So to have Waterford kind of regress back to someplace, that, I don't know, it confused me.
Well, yeah, it is a little ironic because, as you alluded to, 4 out of our 5 school buildings in town are heated with geothermal heat. We have other buildings in town, like Town Hall, which is heated with heat pumps. So, to my mind, it is kind of a step in the wrong direction to be chaining ourselves to natural gas or any fossil fuel for the next 15 years. So, just a little more background about the process. Basically, this process started with the first selectman and then the Board of Selectmen, which sent on to us on the RTM to consider a 25-year-long contract initially, again, with the same basic parameters, that we'd be locked in for that length of time to using natural gas.
So they
and it's with
kind of put
Eversource.
in the pipelines as a kind of a loss leader to them, and you'd be indebted to them for 25 years. kind of.
In essence. So that was presented to us on the RTM, right, for 25 years, same basic terms. At the end of February, we had almost a 2-hour-long debate on that, and then we collectively, as the RTM, voted it down. At that point, we thought the issue was more or less settled. But then, a little more than a month later, at our next meeting, April 4th, the issue was again sent to us. The contract proposal was again sent back to us, this time as a 15-year-long proposal. Little ironic that even though we voted it down, that actually got us better terms the second time that they came back around. So then at our April 4th meeting, it was again considered and very narrowly passed by the RTM. Again, we had another pretty long debate. Members of the public came out, spoke out against it. No members of the public came out in favor of this proposal. So at this point, after a decision is made by the RTM, there is a 2-week period in which any voter in the town has a right to review that decision, and the review process is more or less collecting signatures on a petition to call for a referendum to put the decision of the RTM to a town-wide vote of all the voters in the town, and that's where we are now. And we actually had to collect a minimum of 709 signatures we did it in less than 2 weeks. We actually collected more than 900 just to make sure we were safe.
And I know you collected a lot of them. What kind of response did you get when you asked people to sign on? Was it pretty universally, I want a chance to vote on this? Correct,
yes. It was absolutely universal that we should vote on it. Obviously some people didn't have their minds made up because many of them, it was the first time they were being introduced to the issue. But no one really was opposed to us as a town having a voice in this. But plenty of people, when we explained to them the issue, and some were even aware of it before we asked them to sign, and became more aware of it over the course of those 2 weeks. I would say the majority of people who signed were in favor of voting no, so that we're not in this contract for the next 15 years.
Well, so do you want to talk about what the implications could be about of tying ourselves or yourselves to natural gas for that heating for the next 15 years? And I do have a slide here about costs.
Yep.
Up on the screen now.
Yep.
So this mountain chart,
yes.
What is it showing us?
So what this chart shows is the price increase of natural gas over the last year. It might be a little hard to read, but essentially from this time last year till today, May 24th, 1 week before the referendum, the price of natural gas has increased over 200%. So that brings me to my first concern about this, which is that if we vote yes, and if we are signed into this contract, we will be locked into that pricing model, that very volatile pricing model, for the next 15 years. So, and I say that because in this contract there is no price guarantee. So we would have to pay whatever the pure rate approved rate is for the price of natural gas. So to my mind, looking at that chart, looking at the direction of the price of natural gas, doesn't make a lot of sense to me that if we're not guaranteeing ourselves a price, that we would just be at the mercy of the market price.
Well, and looking at the chart too, I have to say, in addition to it appearing that the price kind of tripled from mid-May of 2021 to mid-May of 2022, the volatility is really shocking.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, if from month to month, we're not talking a gradual incline. It was up and down. And I spent one term on the Board of Ed in Waterford. And when things are volatile, it is really hard to budget for them.
Definitely.
Even even if the high point isn't that intimidating, you just like, you know, in terms of Board of Ed, special ed costs can be very volatile because
Correct.
one or two high needs kids moving in or out of a district
Yes.
can be a 6-digit line item.
Yes.
And it seems as though this gas pricing could set, you know, everyone who's working on the Waterford budget, just like, what do we predict?
Yes, that's actually a really good point, too, because the proponents of this, those who voted in favor of this on the RTM, would argue that they're estimating that there would be savings associated with switching from oil to a 15-year-long contract for natural gas. But looking at that price chart of where the prices have been and where it looks like they're going, I don't understand how anybody can confidently estimate where the price is going to be in, say, a year from now, or 5 years, or 10 years from now. So I don't understand how you could possibly estimate savings. What are you basing that on? The price when? Today? Because the price today is not going to be the price tomorrow if you just look at how volatile the prices have been.
And I'm guessing that, well, for any of the non-renewable fuel sources, prices are ultimately going to go up because extraction will become more and more
Yes.
expensive, and transport, I mean, as the original pipelines deteriorate, they'll need more maintenance. I mean, it isn't something that you can install and then forget about.
Yes. Now, this kind of is the second point, my main concern, but related to what you just said. Something like geothermal heating or a heat pump is a much more stable price because once it's installed, once it's up and running, there is no constant fuel source that you need in order to provide further heating. So you know what you're going to pay to install it and set up the process, and then you know what your costs are going to be in every subsequent year, which are quite low because most of the costs associated with, say, geothermal are upfront costs. But
Yeah.
once you set it up, again, there's no further fuel needed. So the second concern of locking in for 15 years is that under the terms of this contract, we are not allowed to heat those buildings, our own town buildings, with any other heat source other than natural gas for the entire 15 years.
So you really couldn't even turn the thermostats down and bring in space heaters or anything like, well.
I mean, technically, but it really means that we couldn't supplement. Say the price of natural gas got way out of control in 5 years from now or next year or whenever, right? We couldn't then say, you know what, actually we should supplement that with some other heat source like solar or even oil, right? We are not allowed to heat those buildings with anything other than natural gas for the entire 15 years.
That does seem troubling,
Yes.
to say the least.
Yes.
And it is surprising that it would sound like a good deal just based on, you know, promises that, you know, or estimates that it will be cost efficient.
Well, here's the other thing. With the estimates that were presented to us on the RTM, the yearly estimated cost savings are only about $1,700–1,800 per year. So any fluctuation in the price could completely wipe that out very quickly. So to my mind, signing on to a contract for 15 years with such low estimated without any guarantee of savings, it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't seem to me to make a lot of sense. And I guess one of, you know, the other pieces of it is, of course, natural gas has been implicated in climate change.
Of course.
You know, methane, you know, does more damage than CO2. And, you know, we have to think, all of us who are along the coastline, what that means. And in less than 15 years, we might be faced with a crisis situation in which we really sharply have to reduce our fossil fuel use.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like Waterford wouldn't be able to do it for those two buildings.
Certainly, and it's a little ironic. Those buildings are older buildings too. It is conceivable that at some point over the next 15 years we would need to replace them with new buildings. Even then, if we're still within that 15-year time frame, we would, even if we rebuilt with new buildings, we would still have to use natural gas, even in new buildings.
So you couldn't just make it a geothermal with
Correct.
solar panels providing the needed electricity or anything like that?
The electricity's separate,
Yeah.
but for the heating, we would not be allowed
Yeah.
to heat with anything other than natural gas for 15 years, even in a new building on the same plot of land. But getting back real quick to your point about CO2 versus methane. So when natural gas is fracked out of the ground, when it's transported, when it's exposed, it releases methane into the atmosphere. I understand that folks are concerned about carbon release into the atmosphere, and rightfully
Sure.
so. And yes, natural gas would release less carbon into the atmosphere, but it releases significantly more methane. And methane, as a greenhouse gas, is actually 80 times, has 80 times the warming effect of carbon in the atmosphere. It's almost like taking global warming and turning on the burner to high for the short and medium term. So again, we should be moving away from fossil fuels altogether.
I even heard, in New London, almost every neighborhood already has, piped in gas.
Mm-hmm.
It's been there for a long time. But I'm even hearing of people converting their gas ranges now to electric because it's really impossible to contain all of the gas. It's volatile.
Mm-hmm.
Not just the price, but the gas itself.
Sure.
And so even the little bit of leakage, from around your range
Yeah.
makes, a dent in
Yeah.
in your atmosphere from the methane.
Yeah, so it's not only individuals or even individual towns or cities that are moving away from natural gas. In fact, our state as a whole, Bureau regulators just decided to end our almost 10-year expansion of natural gas and subsidization. It's a hard word, of natural gas, where we were subsidizing natural gas in the state so that more people would hook into it. But we at the end of April, ended that relationship. So even at the state level, our Bureau regulators determined that it is not in our financial interest or our environmental interest to continue our relationship with using natural gas.
And I didn't know that at all, but in a way I'm not surprised. 10 years ago, everyone was being urged to convert to natural gas, and
Correct.
there were considerable savings attached to it in the short run.
Yeah.
And then, what was it, about 5 years ago, so many towns were creating fracking waste bans.
Yep.
And then the state kind of followed suit when 55 towns passed their bans. And it does seem as though the shine is off of natural gas as the solution.
Yeah.
And it's even not as attractive as a bridge solution as it seemed 10 or 15 years ago.
Definitely. If anyone's interested, I believe the Hartford Courant reported on this. You can actually, I believe in their reporting about Bureau regulators ending our state's relationship with natural gas, I believe they linked to the full decision of those regulators as well. So you can actually read that in full. Where I read it again was through the Hartford Courant's reporting.
Well, yeah, I didn't know that, but in a way I'm not surprised. But I have to say my experience is that sometimes it's very hard to get people to think in the long term. In New London in 2017, we updated our plan of conservation and development. And the energy piece of it was very focused on expanding natural gas coverage within the city of New London, not merely maintaining the network we have. And, I was going kind of crazy. I'm on the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I kept raising my hand saying, this is a 10-year plan. Aren't we even going to mention renewables?
Yes.
So we did get a sentence mentioning renewables, But even 5 years ago in New London, the thought was that we should expand natural gas service within the city. And I guess, some people in Waterford are still of that same mindset.
Well, it's ironic. During our debate, basically everyone agreed that we should be moving away from fossil fuels and toward, green energy and greener sources of heating. So I think all we really need is a really well-organized capital plan and plan for our town to the investments that we're going to make toward that end. Again, we have already made those investments. Again, we have schools running on geothermal heat. We have town buildings running on electric-powered heat pumps. So these are already in our town. We just need to have a better plan of how we're going to continue to green all of our town buildings.
Now, I did kind of take a quick look at the town of Waterford's plan of conservation and development, and was interested to see that it was a plan of preservation, conservation, and development. And it seems as though the town is probably near due to update it. I think the plan was accepted in 2012 and updated. There was a supplement in 2015, which makes me think that some energy very soon will be going into working on a new 10-year plan. And I do wonder how, natural gas will figure into it, because there obviously was mention in the old plan about energy resources and, climate change and seawater rise.
Certainly. And again, it's not just municipalities looking at this. The state, our state as a whole, we have dedicated ourselves to moving toward that green energy future and to reduce our emissions and our impact on global climate change here in our state. So again, that was part of the Pura regulator's decision that by continuing to expand the use of natural gas, we would not meet our own state's climate change goals to reduce our impact on global warming.
And it's actually good to hear and important that Connecticut is thinking like that, because we're a small state, but we have, over 100 miles of coastline. And a lot of the wealth of the state is in that coastal area. Not every state has that resource. So we certainly should be thinking about it, not just as shoreline communities, but as a shoreline state.
Absolutely.
So shifting a little bit, you started to talk a little bit about Waterford's process for contesting RTM decisions. So maybe we can go back a little bit to how referenda work in Waterford. Okay. Because every town is a little different. And I don't expect people to be able to read all the words on the screen, but I kind of made orange the ones, the key things that electors do have the power and to petition to reverse a decision, or to have a vote to possibly reverse a decision. So I'm guessing that like the day after this happened, you all just went into motion to get the petition.
Yes. So in fact, on the night of the vote, I spoke with our town clerk and requested that he prepare a petition for us, because I know that the day of the RTM's vote or decision being made, that's when the clock starts. That's when you have a 15-day time period. So that next morning, myself and many others, we had about 10 to 15 volunteers out collecting signatures. We organized, got our petition pages, and started collecting. Our RTM meeting was on a Monday. I think we were starting out in front of Stop and Shop and on people's doors by Wednesday. People had their petitions in hand, and we're collecting signatures. And again, it has to be 5% of all the voters in the town have to sign the petition, and that bare minimum was 709 signatures, which even that is very, very difficult and actually impossible for one person to do in a 2-week time frame. So, it was
It is a lot of signatures.
Yes, it was absolutely a collective group effort. So, I'm very, it's amazing how many people do care enough about, participating in the democratic process. But yes, you can't just get that bare minimum, because even if one of those signatures is invalid, then you don't have enough. So we, again, got over 900.
Yeah, you
in
probably
less than
do
2
need
weeks.
to think about a 20% buffer, 15 to 20% even for a local election.
So again, to any voter in town, any decision of the RTM within a 15-day window after that decision is made and voted on and approved can be brought to town-wide referendum, where all the voters in the town get a basically it's just a yes/no choice. So I think you have some wording on the ballot itself.
Oh yeah, in fact I'll kind of go through these not in the order I had them, so
Okay.
we can look at this wording,
Yes.
and you can explain why yes is the right way to vote.
No
I
is
mean,
the
no
right
is
way.
the right way to. That's yeah. I don't want to confuse people. No is yes. Vote no.
So basically, all this is asking the voters of the town is to say, here is the following action of the RTM, that the RTM approved the 15-year-long contract with Eversource. Do you want to approve their decision? And then the question is yes or no. And obviously, we're advocating that people vote no, so that we are not in this contract. So again, it's vote no.
Vote no, because if the RTM had voted no, you wouldn't have to go to the polls.
Correct.
So yeah, so so once you hand in the petition, how is it determined when the referendum will actually be held?
Well, that's all determined by the charter. So again, you have that 15-day time frame. Once you hand in or once enough valid petition signatures are collected and handed in to the town clerk, then the referendum date is set no earlier than 30 days and no later than 60 days after those signatures are collected. We submitted those signatures in mid-April, which basically meant that the referendum had to occur in either May or June. And then the specific date, which again is May 31st, the last day of May, was voted on by the Board of Selectmen and chosen officially by the Board of Selectmen.
And that's sort of the halfway point that.
Yeah.
And I did want to note that you got some good press from the day paper that, the editors of the day looked at the contract and kind of concluded that it was a bad deal.
Yeah. And, so they obviously sided with us on the vote no. But they also made a lot of really good points about how incredibly difficult the petitioning process is and how incredibly difficult it really is for the voters of our town to really fully participate in the democratic process in town, and even to just get to a referendum. I have some familiarity with petitioning. I've done several campaigns in the past. I can't imagine that any voter just kind of walking into this process brand new would be able to easily organize and collect all the signatures and learn the whole process within that very confined 2-week time frame. I mean, I think overall, at some point, we do need to review our town's charter and modernize it in some ways, and actually in many ways. But I think looking at the referendum process could be one of those ways. And it's not only that it's very, very difficult to get to a referendum. In fact, the last time we even had one was 20 years ago. So that just kind of indicates how hard it is. But also, the way in which people vote and the constraints on people's voting are can be problematic as well. Again, because of the time that the RTM voted on this, this referendum vote is just going to happen more or less randomly, unattached to any other election in the middle of May. It might be reasonable.
On the day after Memorial Day.
Yeah. It might be reasonable to consider holding a referendum process on, a larger ballot if there's going to be a statewide election in that year. Maybe it's on that ballot as well. The other problem is that by charter, our basic voting hours, or the default voting hours, are only starting at noon until 8 p.m. Now, most people are very used to being able to show up starting at 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. But on May 31st, people will only have the opportunity to vote starting at noon. Now, the good thing is it's your regular polling location. It's our 3 elementary schools and town hall. So wherever you normally vote, that's where you still go. But you can only vote starting at noon. And obviously, again, because it is the day after Memorial Day, I'm sure many folks will be out of town as well. The other good thing, though, is that there is an absentee ballot process, same process as normal, where you fill out an absentee ballot application, which you can get either online through the Secretary of State's website or from our town clerk's office in Town Hall. You can vote absentee if you feel that you're not going to be able to turn out in person on the 31st.
And, one difference I noticed between New London and Waterford is that for the results of the referendum to be valid, you need a certain minimum number of voters to participate.
Correct. Yes, that is the other gigantic hurdle, which is that you need 5% of all voters in order to sign the petition to put this to a referendum. But actually, to overturn the decision of the RTM, you need 20% of all voters, which is almost 2,900 voters, to turn out and vote no. So, again, we've had previous referendums. Again, the last one was 20 years ago. But most of those are unsuccessful, not because people who voted to overturn, but because not enough people turned out to vote overall.
Yeah, and I have to say I feel a little conflicted about some of this because New London had a referendum last summer, and an action of City Council that I agreed with was overturned by a very low number of voters.
Sure.
But 20% seems very high, especially as someone who's looked at voter registration lists, and there are probably more voters on the registry than actual registered voters in town.
Sure.
People who have moved out of state, there's a kind of a long process to remove them from the voter rolls after they've moved. Some people are listed twice because if they got married, their name was spelled a little differently. They got new voter ID numbers. There are all kinds of things that the 20% really might be closer to 25% of the actual people who can vote in town.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it is, I think it's reasonable to consider the balance. Yeah, it should be a high enough bar,
Right.
But it shouldn't be one so high that restricts people from making a free and democratic choice.
Absolutely.
Again, if we want to leave the bar that high, which might be a reasonable thing to do, then I would say we should probably change the charter to make voting easier in full day voting from starting at 6 a.m.
And perhaps get rid of that 30 to 60 day window, because
Correct.
that's another difference we have in New London. It seems as though it can be put on the ballot like any time. We've had some, I think it is a 30-day minimum, but on the other end, 10 years ago when we had our Riverside Park referendum, the actual action by City Council occurred in October, so it was too late to put on that November's ballot. It waited 13 months to go on the ballot.
Yeah.
But you know what? That ensured a great turnout.
Yes.
I mean, there was an over 30%, 30 to 35% turnout,
Yes.
not just on that issue, but because it was a big municipal election as well.
Yes.
So if it's going to be a one-question ballot, 20% is a pretty high threshold to make.
Yes, I would say it is a very high threshold to make. Especially, again, as you just alluded to, it's not connected to any other ballot. Most people are very used to showing up, and on the ballot you see a list of candidates' names and parties and all that. You will see none of that. The only thing, and again, if you want to pull up that slide.
Yeah, I will show this slide again. And
the only thing you will see on the ballot is this yes/no question. That's it. There is nothing else on the ballot.
And I'll tell people, I cropped this down a lot because it seems to be on a regular 8.5 by 11
Sure.
card, and this little rectangle is like in the middle of a card, and it's maybe 3 inches in the middle.
But the good thing about this is it's a real quick vote. You just get in, vote no, and walk out.
Yeah, and I guess the question isn't getting buried in the middle of a list of candidates.
Sure.
We've had referenda that have kind of people have voted candidates, and the referendum wording is along the top or along the side, and
Sure.
people walk out of the polling
Yes.
place and say, oh my God, I forgot to
Yeah.
vote on the questions.
It will be very clear what people are voting on, and when the vote comes out, it will be very clear the decision that we as a town collectively made, because like you just said, there is really no room for confusion here. It is very clear exactly what we're voting on. If we vote no, we're not in the contract. If we vote yes, we are in the contract. That's it. Again, we're advocating that people vote no so that we are not in this 15-year-long contract with Eversource.
And once again, I think people should understand that a no vote means that the city can start exploring other options.
Of course. It at least gives us the opportunity to do so, as we should. But again, if we're in the contract, we will not have that option for 15 years. So I don't like limiting ourselves and handcuffing ourselves in that way.
Yeah, and 15 years is not as bad as 25, but it's still a very long time when we see projections for how climate issues will be escalating over the next decade or so.
Yeah, again, that's until 2037. So you can think of it in those terms as well.
Well,
that's during our RTM debate, one of our fellow RTM members, he brought up, he has an adolescent daughter. She might be 2 or 3 right now. By the time we're out of this contract, she'll be graduating from high school. Right? That's how long it is. It's quite a long time.
Yeah, that is a really long time.
Yes.
So there's 1 week left to the referendum. What are you doing to get out the vote now, and how could people help with that process?
Well, the number one thing is we're just having conversations with folks, whether that's in a public gathering area. This weekend we spent some time at the Harkness plant sale, met a lot of great folks there, actually registered a new voter there as well. So that's nice.
That's really great, yeah. Always have registration cards with you, right?
Absolutely. And then we're also just going door to door. We have a flyer.
You can hold up the flyer you have. We can maybe, I don't know if it'll get zoomed in on, because I don't think we have anyone to do the zooming.
Well, that's okay. But we're trying to get as many of these out as possible so that, people have seen, we also have yard signs around town that say vote no. So people have seen vote no, seen May 31st, but they don't know exactly what we're voting no on. So we're just trying to go person to person, door to door, and get, the information out there about that it is a 15-year-long contract with Eversource for natural gas heating. And then we have, a variety of points that we're trying to make.
Just out of curiosity, are the Vote Yes people having any kind of campaign to encourage that or not?
Not that I've seen
So
personally.
there's no real groundswell in support of this RTM decision.
Not that I have seen, no.
So I'm guessing if people want to help pass out flyers, go door to door, if they want, are you still looking for locations for lawn signs?
No, I think we put all
Or
of
are
those
they
out.
out?
Yeah, so if anybody wants to participate, you could get in contact with me directly. My contact information is actually on the town's website, waterfordct.org. If you go to the representative town meeting section, both my phone number and email are right there.
So people can just get in touch with you directly.
Yeah.
And because it seems like the big push now is to get people to see it as important enough to get to the polls.
Absolutely.
Or to get them started getting an absentee ballot if they don't think they'd be able to get to the polls.
Correct. And again, the main thing is if there are people who are concerned about this issue, if people, want to make sure that their neighbors get out to vote, I mean, it's just, neighbor to neighbor conversation. That's all we're doing. We're just going around to our neighborhoods, to our neighbors, and just making them aware that they have an opportunity to vote on a important town issue, which they rarely do have that opportunity to vote specifically to make a decision for the town. Again, most people are used to voting for candidates,
Right.
but many people have probably never voted directly on a question concerning our town. So it really is a lot of neighbor to neighbor contact and just being friendly and meeting people and that's been really fun too. Just being able to meet a lot of great folks.
Yeah, Waterford's a little spread out, so it isn't always that easy to do so.
Yeah.
Well, we have about 10 minutes left, I think, and we haven't really mentioned it, but you're also running for office this year.
I am.
I'm thinking that campaign is taking until after May 31st is not the number one thing on your mind. But I know Waterford in 38th District has had Kathleen McCarty representing for several years.
8. 4 terms.
Well, so what issues are you trying to bring to the table on the state level, going beyond Waterford?
Certainly. So again, I've been on the Waterford RTM for the last 2 terms. I first got elected in 2019. Obviously, environmental issues are a big concern of mine. And a big part of the reason why I'm running for state office is because we can address some environmental concerns at the local level as we are doing and as I'm trying to do here. But to have a much larger impact, that is really a statewide issue. For instance, as a state, I think we should be investing significantly more toward the offshore wind energy platforms that are going up right now. And not only is that good environmentally in moving us toward, universal green energy, but it's also a great job creator for our area, for southeastern Connecticut, and in union jobs as well. So that's very important. But overall, it's a lot of these local issues that certainly can be addressed to an extent at the local level, but can be addressed in a much wider way at the state level.
And looking at the button you're wearing, I'm guessing that reproductive rights and health care are on that list as well.
Absolutely, yes. I am pro-choice. Sadly, because of the Supreme Court decision that looks like it's going to be coming out soon, reproductive rights will become a state-by-state issue. So it is very important that we have state legislators within our state who are pro-choice and who will vote to protect reproductive rights, as I will do. But as our current incumbent, Representative McCarty, has actually voted against at the state level.
Well, that's sort of frightening. I'm old enough that I remember the years before, and I grew up in Pennsylvania, and and Pennsylvania was not a pro-choice state in the 1960s. I think New York was, and people with means could travel from Pennsylvania to New York if they needed an abortion. But it was definitely not something that could be done without a whole lot of stress in your life.
Of course. I mean, it's just kind of unimaginable to me that we would be going back. And, I obviously have not, I'm 35. I've not lived in that world, and my friends and have not lived in that world. But it's kind of, devastating to me that we might be kind of going back in that direction, more than 50 years ago.
It's kind of traumatic for me. I always have trouble describing to people how repressed like the 50s and the early 60s were. Everyone hates the boomers these days, and I get that. While I am one. But that one of the dynamics for that generation was there was such a need to break out of that incredible amount of repression. I mean, mixed marriages, whether racially mixed or mixed by religion, were sometimes very difficult to do in the 50s and 60s until the late 60s. And just there was so much that was just, I don't know, impinging on people's ability to express themselves. And I think the boomers maybe did an okay job with that, but we also thought that like the world would be destroyed any day now because of the Cold War influence. So I don't think we did very good long-range planning. We just thought the world wouldn't last long enough for that to matter. So that's my short critique of the boomer generation.
Okay, I will let that lie.
Yeah. But environmentally, it is very sad that actions that could have been initiated in the 1970s would have made a big difference in what we're facing today.
Well, so that's the other main point of my state campaign, which is that a lot of these issues, when you talk about environmental concerns, moving away from fossil fuels, you talk about healthcare concerns, you talk about prescription prices, which are crazy and very high. A lot of these issues come back to what I view as the number one overall issue, which is money in politics, right? These industries, fossil fuel industry, pharmaceutical industry, insurance corporations, they essentially buy off our politicians when they're running for office with big dollars, with high dollar fundraisers, with cash from lobbyists. And that's why it seems like in many ways, even though there is vast, overwhelming agreement on most of these issues, including pro-choice, we seem to be moving in a direction that is against the vast, overwhelming majority. And I think a lot of that comes back to money in politics. So what I'm trying to do, actually, is I'm participating in our state's clean election public financing system. It's called the Citizens Election Program. And, I think all elections should be publicly financed so that when our politicians get elected to office, they serve those who put them there, which is the public.
I agree with you. I will quibble with the state election program details because they highly discriminate against minor parties. Being we have participated, but again, it's like the petitioning signature nightmare.
Sure.
But yeah, I think that money in politics is huge. I've been working with, Medicare for All Connecticut that's trying to get, ultimately, a national health care program would be great. But in Connecticut, a Husky for All program would be great. And yes. The insurance company CEOs have at least once, probably more than once, threatened to move their companies out of the state if even a public option is passed.
Yeah, but look, it's gotten to a ridiculous point where people are paying so much for their health insurance And then you also have a deductible, so you're paying thousands and thousands of dollars a year for a product that when you need to use it, you still have to pay more before even using it. We're at a ridiculous point right now.
It's really frustrating. There was legislation this past session that I actually testified. Well, I didn't go to the LOB, it was a Zoom.
Sure.
But about cost containment. But when I looked at the bill, they were assuming that part of the net cost of providing insurance for these companies was paying for advertising.
Yeah.
And I had that other revelation that like Ringo Starr's All-Star Band is coming to Connecticut. This sounds really ridiculous. But it's coming to Connecticut, playing in Bridgeport at the Hartford Healthcare Amphitheater. Yeah. And I saw that and thought, wait, why does Hartford Healthcare have an amphitheater, and where did the money come from?
Sure.
And it's really scary, because where did they get money from? Mm-hmm. From, people who need health insurance. Definitely. And people who need medical care. And instead of providing all that medical care, they're putting their name on an amphitheater in Bridgeport.
Yes. Look, ultimately, on the policy, healthcare needs to be treated as a public good.
Absolutely.
Where health and healthcare is put first and foremost and only, rather than our current system, which puts profits first. Because if profits come first, they're always going to come first, regardless of your health situation.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, there are threats of, things moving backwards rather than forwards. Well, in our last 2 or 3 minutes, maybe you can just end up by telling people how they can help with the referendum in this last week, and how they can get in touch with you to learn more about your campaign.
Okay, so one last time, if you want to help on the referendum, please get in contact with me directly. I guess I can also share my website, which also has my contact information. It's just nickgauthier.com. That's nickgauthier.com. But if you want to help, or even if you're still a bit unfamiliar, I would definitely recommend reading the Days, the New London Days coverage of this issue. They've covered it several times. If you have a strong feeling on this, I would also recommend maybe writing a letter to the editor into the Day. It's only 200 words, so anybody should be able to handle that. And then again, if you want to get in contact with me, we can organize how it would be most effective for you to go out and talk to some of your neighbors and folks that you know around town to educate them further on the issue.
Are you going to have people at the polls on the day of as well, holding signs, or?
As much as possible. Again, this is a very grassroots, volunteer-driven effort. Obviously, people have jobs during the day. I'm going to try to be out there as soon as I can. But, again, this all kind of came together.
It was whirlwind.
Yeah, in a whirlwind type of way. And just, we were lucky enough to have enough people to have enough time to get this through. So hopefully we'll have some folks at some polling locations, but regardless, know that we want to be there, but we're all just volunteering toward this. So.
And and for those who are not sure whether you can get out to the polls between noon and 8 p.m. on the 31st, it's not hard to get an absentee ballot and to vote ahead of time.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Nick, and good luck with the referendum. And we'll probably be hearing more from you as the year progresses.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I learned some stuff, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah. And
don't fall. That's when you know you're gonna go dry. Till the rain don't fall.